So regular viewers know I'm a huge reader, and this book, Talking to Girls About Duran Duran by Rob Sheffield, has been a really interesting journey for me. It's sort of a memoir about growing up as an adolescent, sort of the new wave years. You know, bands like Talking Heads, Toto, Aha, Paul McCartney had a few new wave singles, Adam Ant, Nina, all that good stuff. And it's talking about just sort of how this guy, as like a young intellectual, was fascinated by the layers there was to this art. You know, it wasn't just a song, there was a whole look and an ideology and all this other stuff, right? And it all fed into each other and was part of the New Romantic movement. And what's interesting to me about the New Romantic movement is how in-depth it was and how complete it was. It wasn't just, oh, we're doing this thing to do this thing. It was so many layers within layers within layers. And that's really important, I think, if you're trying to create a band with sort of a lasting image. If you look at a lot of the bigger bands today, a lot of them are tied into ideologies. The biggest bands of the last 30 years, look at Napalm Death, for example. The aesthetic and the ideology are one and the same. That's not to say you can't be successful without being an ideological band. Just look at Iron Maiden. They don't really have that many ideologies. Bruce Dickinson definitely has a bit of a inclusivity speech in every show, but it's not. You can enjoy Iron Maiden and not worry about the politics behind it. But I'm not necessarily saying it's political as much as it's like creating the entire literary viewpoint behind it. And I think the sheer the high entry level for being really into new romantic music is really interesting to me. I kind of enjoy music that forces you to really think a little bit about weird 19th century literature. And obviously don't want that to be all my music. Obviously I love Motorhead. Obviously I love silly stupid pop music, but I think it's an important component to have, and it's a component that caters to music journalists really well. And that's something to think about when you're creating music that you're trying to, make sense to journalists and stuff, is you want to create music that the journalists want to find out about. You want to create music that's interesting to discuss with someone who discusses music for a living or wants to discuss music for a living, right? And I think that's a big takeaway from the New Romantic movement. Kind of tied into that as a whole. You can see my Airbnb in Saint-Herblain, which is outside of Hellfest. A big takeaway from all this for me is sort of like, how can I tie my band into a greater movement? How can my bands look like they're part of this ideological thing? Because that makes them a lot more interesting, a lot more likely to have people want to dig into them and find out more. And I think the more we find out about our bands, the more we find out about ourselves, because we're digging and learning and growing. And I think having that sort of growth tied into your music is important, because it brings in young fans, but it also brings in older, moneyed fans who want to have something that can sort of dig into everything and make it all interesting and growing. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. If you're just looking for inspiration, it's always worth sitting down and watching some new wave videos, just because they're so weird and unique and show music from a time when that very weird, unique thing was, super encouraged, and it was cool that it was super encouraged. Just something for you to check out when you get a chance. Take care.